Well, if there's any announcements, I have one announcement that DIGFM will be having another in-person reunion at Full Access 26 in August at Los Altos, California, where FileMaker developers and Claris engineers and evangelists will relax and revel while presenting and discussing topics like this, one you're hearing tonight, and so much more. FA26 DIGFM1, that's FA26 DIGFM1, is your $150 DIGFM discount to this premier full access FileMaker Unconference conference. And it's going to be your Engage Fix in 26 because there is no Engage this year. It's just all of our little side gigs that we're doing now. So anyway, check it out, fullaccess.us. All right. And any other announcements tonight? All right, get on with the show then. Yeah, Bruno? Back to you, Bruno.
Ready? Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Good. Sorry about that. All right, so I'll dive right into it. I'll show you the meat around the bone, and then we'll get to the bone. So basically, the goal with this is to speed up FileMaker development completely. Just change the way you do it. I know everybody uses AI, but the way that people use AI, I've done it. A lot of copy paste, a lot of re-explanation, a lot of everything. So the goal is just to, for this example, start from a completely empty file with no table, and I'll just build 3 tables right from there with like a single prompt, and then I'll just ask the AI to generate script, and it's going to use the context of the solution to do so. So here I just did a quick prompt to say that I want to integrate Asana, which is just a software I use on FileMaker, and I just ask it to just list a few fields, which I'll select over here, do copy and say, create tables. And I'll just make sure to have space in here. Should have done the one at a time. And I'll send that over. The system is going to build a migration plan for that. And it's going to give me 3 execution to run. Can read them just to confirm when you're playing with data, but that's not important. I'm going to run them all. And the system is just going to generate me 3 tables in my system based on the description. So what that opens is that you can start integrating an API just by doing one prompt on one side, or you can do it directly via the ask mode over here. I like using Atlas because it's really nice. And then I can just jump into scripting right away. I like starting a new conversation when I do that. And I can select, let's say, workspace, get all the field. I'm going to create myself a layout so that the system can figure out where to save the information. Let's call it workspace, save that in, pull a refresh of the metadata so I can just select my layout. I don't have to worry about doing any export, and I'm just going to go ahead and save, and I can activate web mode as well. API and save them into the, and here I've got a quick autocomplete to select table and layouts like this. And I can even, I did that prior to the recording, but I added an API key and a custom function, so it's a little bit private. Here's the custom function. Here, and it's called Asana key. I'm going to send that in. The system's going to start working. Build everything for me, and it's just going to paste it then into the script workspace. If it times out, I'm just going to stop here, but I think it should be good. And there you go. It's going to return me a full script. I can preview the XML, which doesn't mean much. And then it just booms a new script in the script workspace, navigates proper layout, do the curl, use my custom function, use proper error handling, and it's just there and it works. It's going to return me assumptions if there's anything that's unclear, a couple of warnings if there's something to check, if something was missing, and then I can just refresh my metadata and that script is able to use for something else. So that's kind of the meat of the product. Of the concept. The idea is because it lives in FileMaker, it can work directly in your script workspace, can access your table, can create fields, use them, so you never really have to worry about not using the proper thing or having to do another extraction, like another report of some sort to create and use the system. So that's kind of the goal of the system. I don't know if this is a point where people have questions to begin with, or if you want me to deep dive into how the structure is built and how I got into this beautiful thing.
Well, I think, yeah, just go ahead and let's see. Like, I mean, this all works, right?
Yep, I can run it actually if you want. I think that's a good thing to do. Like, I'll delete the key afterwards. It's not a big deal, but
So, except for your API that somebody was asking about, you pretty much started from ground zero.
I started from the only thing that I add is the API key because I wanted to put that in, try to kind of avoid doing it. I'm not going to debug it. I'm just going to go and see if it's going to create records. It did. I don't know if it probably going to have some mistake, which is fine for an AI, but it did not. So it created that. I have Asana open here, and that is my workspace associated with that. So the script worked straight from ground zero. It's not going to be perfect, as AI is not perfect right now, even when you create any kinds of script, but it's pretty damn close most of the time. And if there's something that's not going to work, or where the AI is unsure, it's still going to paste because it's going to repair and make sure it goes into the script workspace. Even if there's a command that's not supported or whatnot, it's going to be removed. A comment is going to be put. There's going to be another assumption over here set. There's going to be set, or a warning that's going to tell you, hey, I did this, but this doesn't exist, and so on. Because I'm letting the AI drift a little bit, because it happens sometimes that I'd rather have a 90% perfect script if I'm building something or if I'm updating something, because you can actually reselect that script and work live in it into the system, and add it to do you can say modify whatever. So I can say, I'm trying to see what I can do. This script navigate to the up, and it's going to reuse. Well, in this case, I'm in a conversation, depending on which provider you pick. For OpenAI, there's a past response, so there's kind of a cache on their end. I'm rebuilding some on my side, but it's going to reuse the script, and whatever script you select, it's automatically going to parse whatever metadata it needs to modify or understand the kind of the logic behind it. And then it doesn't return me a full script. It's going to return me a delta to just put at the top like this, and it's going to put it at the right spot. So when you do edit in a live script, you don't have to copy the whole thing. The AI doesn't need the whole thing. And that's one of the best things when you're trying to modify. Creating a script from scratch, I think I could go on ChatGPT right now, could have asked the same prompt. It would have taken a little bit longer and probably a little bit more back and forth, and I would have had to explain myself. And the structure would not be that good either. But when you go into modifying and playing with multiple scripts, it can apply specific deltas at specific place. And instead of asking to regenerate the whole thing, I don't need to. You just need to understand what you want to do, where to put it, how to do it, and it's going to do it at the right place. So that's kind of another cool thing about that. So, yeah.
So this is a great first demo. You just generated probably the most questions in the first couple minutes than any of our
I'm
other.
not seeing the question, so I'm letting.
That's okay. But before we get into the questions, I encouraged you to actually to go ahead and give this demo first before we got into all the intros.
Yep.
But you want to tell us who you are now that you
Yeah.
demoed this.
Well, I made a couple of slides, super pretty slides, just to tell who I am and how I ended up making this thing. So I'm going to restart from where I was before we started recording, but I'm a FileMaker developer. I've been doing this for about 10 years. Very early on, and when I started, I built an app for my own company, for my own internal use on iPad, and I got really interested into WebDirect because of like the capacity of like, building web apps. I had no idea what they were, and for FileMaker Go because you could use the SDK and build some iOS app. At that time, I think FileMaker was version 14. I've played with FileMaker in the past, like as a toy, but no, I've started really late in the FileMaker community compared to a lot of you folks, but still. And then I moved the further I went into it. I got more interested into integrating FileMaker into other things because I think it's a good backend. It's a good database. It has a lot of great qualities, but the more the technology were evolving, I was noticing that like web had so much more potential. You could do so much more things faster or differently and using different language. So I really got into integration, building portals, using Python, creating Docker apps, but always with FileMaker kind of at the back end of the system. And I started this project back in November 2025. And at that time, I was doing a lot of what people were doing, a lot of copy paste, and this is how I kind of started this. I added buttons in the script workspace with a plugin because I was tired of running Apple Script or running script to do copy paste with a plugin. So I just created buttons at the top that I could just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. And eventually I was tired of that and I decided to push further. Then I started working with Charles, that's on the call with us at Clay, formerly FM Better Form, and we started exploring more agentic workflow and kind of AI integration and things like that, which really opened my eyes to what you can actually do with AI if you code it properly. So big shout out to Charles for that. So that's a little bit about who I am. And I kind of summarize the problem of what motivated me to do that is like copy paste, a lot of work. It's sloppy most of the time. It worked for some basic stuff or if you had a lot of script, but it was really slow at the time I was using it. And it was never really right. And I had to use another IDE. And if I was updating something else, I had to tell that I had updated that and it was not aware. So I didn't really like it. I was always switching between FileMaker and something else. In that context, switching and using various AI that didn't understand anything. Models today are pretty different, but when I was doing the copy paste, not long ago, it wasn't that great. So that was really the problem I was facing. All those things, like just the delta generation I showed you there, of not having to resend everything and re-explain everything every time you do something, or if you add 3 fields in a table and the AI doesn't know, or that kind of stuff that makes it painful to like. The more I use AI, the lazier I get. The lazier I get, the more I expect, and like it's a cycle. That's the problem. And that's the answer is Jenny, is what I'm showing you today, because it lives in FileMaker. It sees what you work on. You can have 3 scripts open. You can have 1. You can parse the table, the fields, the custom functions, the layout, not the content of the layout, but all those names, all those internal IDs are there. It's super context aware of what you're doing. Makes it easy. Whatever you refresh, it's there. It's available. And the best thing about being a plugin like this is because it's a plugin that you put in your FileMaker folder, it has a special path for a lot of SDK stuff to get those information without lagging, faster than using an MCP server, faster than doing whatever you want to do with the data API. There's no such thing. If AI could work offline with a custom model, which is what I was doing at the beginning, they can run this without the internet, and it works. So that's another good thing. And then I integrated knowledge in it. So I made it parse thousands of scripts to get patterns of what goes together so that when you make a request It doesn't hallucinate steps. It doesn't hallucinate a JavaScript function when you try to do a while. It does. All of those steps are verified, and all the proper way of using them in FileMaker are in there. It's not perfect because like it would take a crazy amount of time to make it perfect, but it's damn close. So when I ask a question, because you're gonna ask a question, if I ask for a debug, if I code something, what I get, even if it's not perfect, I know it's well structured, and I know it's gonna paste. Because there's nothing more frustrating than trying to generate a code on an AI and you go to paste it and it doesn't work. That was a really, really, really huge pain that I had. So that's kind of the answer to that big problem. And why this matters is super simple. It removes the manual effort of doing the copy paste. It removes the manual effort of re-explaining yourself, because when it doesn't work on ChatGPT, you're going to move to something else. When it doesn't work on that other thing, you're going to move to another one. And every time you move between models, you re-explain. I still have cases, even today, this morning, I was working on something where I switched from GPT to Gemini to Anthropic, but I stayed in the same conversation. So when I send the new message to the new model, my system adds some context of what we tried, and I don't have to re-explain myself. I can just re-ask my question. That's just that alone, big winner, because everything is centralized. I think it's also nice to like, if you do web search like I just did for OpenAI, works really well with OpenAI. They have a great API. Well, what you're going to get is going to be up to date for the API documentation, so you know you're going to get the right thing. And like as I said, if an output is wrong between the LLM, the AI, and what I receive, there is a repair section in the plugin in the Genie workflow that's going to make sure you can paste it either way. So even if it's not perfect, it goes in. It's always going to go in. And as you can see, you can just move faster. You can move faster. You can create modules that would have taken you hours in a couple of minutes, or at least get you started and get like the groundwork. Creating 15 tables can be long if you want to just create a side file to integrate something. I can generate one prompt that's going to do all these tables, and I can use an AI to tell me what should I prompt. So I think this is really the reason why it matters is you just work faster. It's less effort. You work faster, and we're there using AI. Most of you probably use AI already for other works, or even probably for FileMaker. And that brings me to kind of another tool that I'm gonna show after going through Genie and more of in details, is how crazy it can get. What you can build without ever touching a single line of anything. This is a platform I've built completely doing agentic coding, so just prompts. I drew some stuff on my iPad, like send that to an AI to do more FileMaker introspection, to ask more questions, to like have better tools, and it just gives you an idea of how far this could go with the proper tools attached to it, if I can say. So that's going to be another part. I'll go more in detail after that. And also, yeah, this is going to be important. What's next with that? So with what I've discovered over the past few months of building this is that I'm at probably 10% of what can be done. So the LLM in FileMaker is great. It's amazing, but I'm not building AI. So my goal is not to build a project and sell tokens. So I don't care about that. I want to build a bridge, because I think there's so many models and it's going to keep evolving. And as of today, the models are probably at their dumbest, and we're going to see, like, that's another conversation. But in a month from now or 2 months from now, we're going to laugh at what we were doing like 6 months ago or something like that. So with the internal tools that I have in there, because I can apply select script, navigate into the FileMaker interface from the back, I can actually use it to do much more than what it does. So right now I'm able to, like the Delta that I showed you, applied something at the top, but I can make it disable, go further down, paste something else, disable, go up, and so forth. I have a mode in there that I'm going to be able to show you as well, which is a discovery mode. If you're trying to debug a script that's attached to 12 other scripts, it's just going to parse them all without having you needing to click on anything. And that brings me to that second section, which is something I'm already working on, is to have that local capacity to connect it to your web IDE or like a cursor or any web building tool, which is something that Charles and I are working for Clay, which is kind of a way for the web app to know your database without using the API, just by leveraging those tools. So there's a lot more coming with where this is going. I'm not saying this is like the what's next is tomorrow, but it's just to kind of give an idea of the possibility that it opens. It's quite something. So that's kind of the presentation about the product. So now I think if people have questions before I start diving into more of what it does, it would be interesting.
Well, I guess that, yeah, there were lots of questions, but each person who has a question should stand up for himself, because I would have to go through quite a list here.
Yeah, I can see. I don't want to click on it just because it's going to move me to another desktop. So I'm going to let.
Let's see if I get. Yeah, you can always unmute yourself and ask, or let me see. What do we got? Well, Vince may not be able to speak for himself at the moment, but he asked, Bruno, why did you not ask AI to create your layout?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't use layout much, so so
Because
most
you're
of the
doing
stuff
web apps, I guess, or what?
I do it. Yeah, I do most of the thing I do in web apps. And I did like I could go there, but for me, I didn't see the value yet because of the way the layouts are made. They're heavy. They're super heavy. And I think I would need to be able to have like a translator in between instead, and just ask the AI, tell me what you would do. Okay, I would put a field at that place, and then let the translator do the work. Because otherwise, you'd burst your tokens and empty your wallets trying to generate a beautiful layout. It's not efficient right now, I think. And yeah, web app, you can just put a web viewer in it and like go on your web IDE, generate a web viewer, put a couple of JavaScript functions and plug your scripts into that, and you're good to go. And it's probably going to be faster, more responsive, look better. So yeah, that's why.
Uh-huh. Um, what was it? Well, David had a few questions and comments, worthy ones at that. David, you want to ask those now?
Um, yeah, I can ask some of those. Um, we had a brief discussion before we started recording about that set error capture on and
Yes, I knew it
how
was
you,
coming.
and it's the start of that script again. It's just going, geez. And also even freeze window and set error logging off. I mean, why is
Mhm.
it all of those things? I mean, error logging's already off. Is that
Yep.
a placeholder to be able to easily turn it on or something?
So that's most of the parsing of the system that I use, public system and some of my own. They add those patterns, and those patterns stayed. Beauty of it is you can turn them off.
Hmm.
And this is not final, but I added rules. That's something that was somebody complained to me really early on. Not everybody works the same. Some people add comments at every steps. Some people don't want anything. And I didn't try counter rules like putting, I can probably try that. No, center of capture at the top of this thread. And then you can put it in. And you can set those rules, and the goal is to be able to customize those things.
Hmm.
In the project I think it was a month ago, I tried to build some sort of a cache that would kind of get how you work. And that was not a great idea. Well, I think it was a great idea, but the way that I implemented it was not a great idea. So I ended up removing it. But the rules, if I were to try something else, you can actually see if it works. That would be actually nice. And the goal is for you to be able to customize a little bit how it behaves and how you code. So I'm going to try to do this like a second script for let's say their project. Yeah, let's go. Just going to dump all the field over there. I'm going to select project. We can do that. I'm going to need to refresh for layouts. Project, the key, and You give me Steve. You have to be, one thing I've noticed is the more precise you are, the more precise the code is going to be. You can try to wing it and just like dump a lot of metadata and try to tell it, yeah, you know what? I'm giving you all of this, figure it out. It's not really useful. Best layout. Probably at the top. We're going to see if it adds those captures. So those are patterns. Yeah, but yeah, the goal is to be able to set up what you want. There is kind of a default frame of what it's going to use. And there is also, and those are kind of in the way that I feed the AI what it can and can't do, because I'm not feeding the AI everything. I'm feeding the AI only the things that are required to do the job. So some requests are faster than others, and also the token usage is pretty low. So when you do a big script of like 150 lines, you can expect about 20,000 something tokens, sometimes 30,000, because it's kind of you bring your own key, you choose your own provider. I like to give some of the steps that I give by default, or depending on what you do, or based on families. So if you ask for certain things, system is going to do certain things. We'll see if that works. So in here, I don't see it anymore.
Yeah, that's good.
Because it follows. It's a multi-request kind of pipeline with a kind of an agentic flow. So those things go into priority. Some of theirs don't. So yeah, you can tweak it. If you don't like it, you can tweak it. And definitely, I think it's important. It's gonna do best effort, and it's gonna use most of the patterns that I have. And for those who are curious, like FM starting point was one of the that I used. Some of the old system that I've built pretty large rebuild of database. So maybe those bad codings are from me. I don't know.
I noticed also just quickly there that you've got a default of using case instead of if.
Yeah. Yep. That's going to happen a lot.
Oh, there's somebody else who doesn't prefer case, huh?
Use if when you need if, use case when you use case.
That's what I thought. But I met people who always use case.
AI does not discriminate, so.
I've met them as well.
So just by giving it text prompt, you're telling it what to do from now on?
Yep.
Oh, interesting. I remember.
Yeah, those are rules that are enforced by project, by the way. So
where is
you're going to load
all these rules?
So it creates a JSON profile locally on your machine. So it doesn't save on the plugin. So if let's say I create a new version, a new build of the plugin, and I replace this one, all your rules, all your the conversation history as well that are saved in the interface, which you can go back to, those are saved locally on your machine. So they're apart from the plugin itself, which is useful when you generate 5 builds a day because nothing is working. So you don't lose what you do. The goal with project is really to push it further. There's one thing that I added in it recently that's a game changer. I use a lot of custom function, and it's one of the only thing that does not get pulled automatically. It's a manual process. I'm trying to find my way around it, but it opens the window. You have to do a command A and then copy and press OK, and then it imports, but it saves the custom function. So the next time that you open up the file, unless you updated the functions, you do not have to run the import. So that's the only thing that's manual. The rest, as soon as you hit refresh, it's there. You also have a little preview to see like what's selected with the field ID. So if ever you want to just copy this and go and dump this on another AI, have fun with it. It's a good way of like gathering the information from there. And here I can probably see if this works. I have no idea. But it did. So it created all my projects. So like, again, sometimes it doesn't work. And the structure, I can ask it like the same question again from a different model. I'm probably going to get a different structure. Actually, why not do it? I'm just going to copy the question. And I can try. I like Entropic when you're really stuck. Google, I like it. It's pretty good with FileMaker. I don't know what you guys use. Um, web mode. Web mode's not compatible though with Google, so that's going to be funny. And the key, I think that's it. Yeah, that's right. And that's for me right now. The way that some of the V1 beta endpoint of Gemini are done. I don't remember if it's the beta model, but there's some models that the web search work. But they have like, I think they're V1 beta, like you cannot force a JSON schema if you want them to return something specific. So I had to disable some functions to be able to kind of use all the models, because it's fun to jump around and like if you try to generate something that's super complicated and OpenAI just gets it wrong, and then you try to get OpenAI to fix it and fix it and fix it. Like you just end up in a loop, so you can move to something else. And try it. So I think that's pretty cool. But I'll see the difference in code without the web access.
You're seeing all these kinds of problems it's funny, it's just not coding, it's all kinds of things where it gets stuck in a
Yeah.
loop.
Yeah.
Let's see. Who else? Well, I don't know if Karsten wants to speak up for himself there, but he was asking if he could see it added from a blank state. And
What do you mean?
yeah, Karsten, is he still here?
Not without anything selected, I'm guessing.
Um, I don't know because
Without
Karsten,
Gemini. Yeah, Gemini still did something pretty nice. Actually,
Karsten,
nicer than the other one.
oh, Karsten has no microphone, I see. So I don't know if he was talking about that API or if he was talking about the plugin. Um, let's see. Well, I don't know, let's go on to the next thing. And I guess a few people asked while you were demoing, is this an add-on or a plugin?
Yeah.
Not an
So
add-on, but it's a plugin, right?
it's a plugin that you put in your folder like this. It sits over here. So and it uses like that at the beginning. That's what I added. So like the ability to be able to copy and then paste. So I started with that, and then I added an edit button, and those things, because they're native, they're instant. And the reason why I looked at this is because I used MBS a lot, and I'm like, well, he did it, so why can't I do it? And then I went on going and searching. And then I thought, why don't I just put an AI in there that's going to be connected to that? And like the more I was playing around, I'm like, yeah, well, there's a lot you can do. This part here is detach. I've added it's not a FileMaker window, and I didn't find a way to attach it there, so I created an icon over there. And if you minimize it and I go on my dock, I added an icon so you can find it again. It runs within the FileMaker process. So it's not a separate process. It's not a separate app. It's really a FileMaker plugin.
Speaking of plugins, your screen answered one of my questions, which was, did you test this with other plugins installed like Monkey Bread?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I
They
see
don't
you have
conflict.
Monkey Bread there, right?
Yeah, and I have base element as well. Installed. So there's no difference in what he does, because we're not touching the exact same place. But it's kind of the similar thing, and none of his function, I think, are affecting me. I could have used his plugin at the beginning to feed the information in the Explorer that I have over here, but it was just easier to have it that way, because otherwise, to use this plugin, you'd need to have another plugin. And I know how people hate plugins. I get it, but the plugin is not really how it's running. It's just a bridge. It's the bridge that gives this interface what it needs to do the work. So it could be a separate software with a plugin that talks to it, but it's just better to have it all in one place. And if you have multiple FileMaker window open and you close the script workspace, if I open something else, it moves between things. So like I can open a system over here, and I'm gonna close it here. I open to database, like if I do this, and the plugin right now it did nothing. But if I open another system, now I'm in somewhere else, and it fetches the new table from this database, and I'm
Looking-
in.
Bruno?
It's looking at your context.
Yeah, all the time. Because it can detect the file ID. It can also detect if the file is hosted or not. So if you have two versions of the same file, they could have different rules.
Bruno?
Yep.
First of all, incredible coding. I'm overwhelmed. I'm impressed. But I think slowly, and this moves incredibly fast for me. I can't keep up. So I'm just going to ask some really simple questions, like, what is the plugin? I didn't get that. What is this plugin?
So the plugin adds, to make it super simple, it adds 4 buttons to your.
What is the plugin?
The name.
The name is Jenny.
Genie, and where do you get that?
For now, it's on my machine. You have to steal my MacBook.
So this is a plugin that you wrote.
Yes.
Are you willing to like sell that or distribute?
Yes, that's yeah. The goal is to distribute it because it needed to be stable enough to distribute, and I think I've reached a point where it is. So my goal is to bring it.
I saw Genie, and I was searching on the Chat GPT site to find out. So I'm a little overwhelmed, but I definitely am interested in this plugin. So reach out to me. Second question there. So first of all, what part of the world are you in?
I'm in Quebec, Canada.
Eric, we have to do whatever it takes to get him to full access. There's other people struggling with what you're doing that you've got to come share. There's a lot of developers who want this. I know that. Please put that in. I don't care what it takes. I want you there. We will get you there one way if you're willing to come. If you're willing to come to America, I know there's a political problem right now, but we'd love to have you there in California.
Absolutely.
So I have a meeting with somebody from a large FileMaker house, I shouldn't mention the name, tomorrow, who's trying to do exactly what you're doing already. We need to talk. So third question is, are you able to massage, manage, or control the relational graph, or is it just throwing a table on there?
Yeah, for now I'm not touching about the graph at all. It pulls the table occurrences, not the base table. It can work with both. So you don't have only the table name. So if you're working with a system that has specific context, it's going to select the proper context. You can select it. So let's say you're in contact invoice and you don't want to do invoice, you can select that because it's based on table occurrence in this place, and you have a search bar for that.
But can you create the relationships and
not yet.
Make it do anchor buoy in the relational graph or anything like that?
I didn't check that to do that. It would have to be kind of a mouse control kind of thing. So
your web apps make their own joins anyway, then, right?
At this point, yeah, because all you do is you create layouts and scripts to feed them. But I still work in FileMaker. I still have things that I do in FileMaker, but I'm going to do doing the relationship is not the hard part.
Can you show me the graph that you've got behind this thing that you built in front of us?
Here it's just a bunch of tables.
Okay, yep. It's just raw. All right.
Yeah.
Can you? So that would be an amazing thing if you can get it to the point of massaging the graph to make it a certain way and colorize it and organize it and build up certain models. I know that's a big pull, but that's there. How about in scripting? Can you when you're putting in the prompt to create scripting, can you make it add annotation?
Yep, I can try to put a rule and see.
Because annotation's a big thing to me. Like I break up everything I'm doing in paragraphs and everything's explained in case somebody's got to take it over, right?
Rules should allow to do that, but it worked with the set error. So I'll just try to pull the latest layout here. Task I didn't create. And I'll create that last script.
Oh, you are fast.
I know.
I can slow down though if I'm going too fast.
Yeah, I'd be happy if you did, but it's nice to see that I can't work that fast. But it's beautiful I'm seeing what you're doing. You're brilliant.
So if I go here and I do
play the video back on slow.
Create a new script.
Yeah, we'll play the video back at half speed.
We got to select that. And this part here of having access to like your metadata and be able to search it is game changer, because if you want to reference like specific things, you can. If you want to reference specific steps, if you wanted to do specific things, you have access to like all the functions of FileMaker with this. Or if you do the dash, you have what you have selected in your Explorer.
Are you going to be presenting this on Richard Carlton's FM training on TV?
I didn't talk to him. I would have probably to reach to him.
Oh, we finally beat him.
It's a little rich, yeah. What? Sorry, Eric?
We finally beat him at something there.
Yeah, well, this is pretty rich for the crowd he's got.
Could we? Oh, I guess I had a question too. It's like, so if you prompt it exactly the same way twice, is it going to give you the exact same result?
No,
or does it kind of?
No, it's AI. We can do it. I can do it twice in the same sequence, and we'll see. Just want to make sure that I got everything here. Yeah, that looks good.
Eric, while he's doing that, can you make sure we get his contact information?
I have his contact information.
Okay, could I have it?
Yeah, you're gonna have to give me a raise.
Okay, yeah, I promise.
20% raise, I think.
Yeah, more it's ice cream for you.
Then we're gonna let that run. Now I downgraded to 5.1 here, but models 5.1. I've had a great time with it. Works really well. When I'm stuck, I like to move to Gemini first. Gemini is super good at FileMaker natively. I found, and when I feel like overpaying, I go to Claude.
So are you paying for all these?
Yeah, those are tokens. So you bring your own key.
I see.
What kind of money are you talking about with ChatGPT?
All right, so here send us this. We're going to see if there's a lot of comments in here, and yes, and yes.
Oh, there we go.
And yes, and yes, and yes. So it follows the rules.
But no white space.
Yeah, that would be the next question. That would be the next question. Yeah.
I think this is something that I should add after the fact, because what the LLM is trying to do is save tokens. Trying to save tokens. So if it puts a lot of comments, because it's a new XML line each time you put a comments, but I can make it probably as a rule again, like every time you put an annotation, put an empty comment at the top, and it's but
yeah,
it's a matter of like making it do what you want it to do. I'm gonna try here to do just gather a project that I have. I have SN open here, this empty project. 1, 2, 3, and 3 like this. And I'm going to try to go pull that and test the script, because it's possible that the script is not going to work. So you have to test it. Yes, that's good. And I think in this case, it forgot my API key, or
really?
I think it did.
Oh.
It's not there. See, it's not perfect.
While Bruno's running through that, maybe it's a mental process that we all run, that once AI has created the script, we'll go in and add the white space, and that's a method to read what it's written.
True.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing to do that, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad thing, because it happens. It doesn't like make everything perfect. As if you do web application or anything with AI, but if it can get 90% right,
yeah.
I just built a database that had nothing, and I have 3 APIs already integrated. I didn't read a single documentation. So, and it did create my task, and it works again.
Well, there goes the intern's job.
So yeah, I think this is really what's nice, and OpenAI right now is my favorite one because of the way that the API is built. It's much easier. It's much more complete from what I've experienced. But the Anthropic and Google, they work super well as well. And yeah, the way that I see it is, like, you're going to see a bunch of payloads in the logs. Yeah, you're going to see what I send, what's being sent, and so on. But like I told you at the beginning, having like the tokens is like, how can I say that? Whatever you send to the AI is one thing, but the way that I handle it in the front, the way that I handle it when I receive it, and the way that I access and push it into your system is really the value of it. Because if you were to just select your metadata and again send that request to the ChatGPT, you'd probably get something right. But my system is able to pull these warnings, to pull these things, to know how FileMaker is done, to apply those rules, And again, you're still in your system. I haven't changed Windows since the beginning, and whatever I just created is available right there. And we wanted to try it again, so I'm going to try to send it again and see what comes out.
Well,
And this time it's going to have
uh,
extra context, though.
have to tell the model that you don't have to clear local variables at the end of a script.
Right.
Oh, yep.
Bruno, can you give us some rough idea what kind of money you spend on different models to do this kind of work on that so people could project forward what it might cost?
It costs nothing, to be honest.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's nothing. Where do I have that? I'm looking for my favorite bar. Sorry. So I've been very, very active in April for 12 million tokens, and I think I have like $19.
Oh my God.
It's stupid. And if I go to, well, let's say March, where I did a lot of heavy development. So
Wow.
And that's just using ChatGPT. Like, and there's a lot of those days, even in April, where I was debugging and resend it. But when you don't, and this key, I'm bad. I'm using the same key for multiple projects. So maybe $10-15 if you do like all day usage, like a lot of usage. It's nothing, and it depends what models you use. But
I wonder if that's going to change in the real world when the AI people start knowing how much it's being used.
How dependent you are, yeah. So what you did just right now, was that like $1 worth of work or what? Or less?
Oh, okay.
Pennies.
Probably less.
Yeah.
Huh.
Probably like 30 cents maybe since the beginning.
Huh.
And I regenerated from the same thing. So when you keep a conversation active and you keep sending, there's a lot more attached context. But technically, when you're done with a script, you move away and you start over. That's the way I work, because I like to start fresh if I work with a different script. So this recreated the same format of script, different way. And now here you see kind of a to-do, replace this with your blah, blah, blah. And here it didn't assign my key. I don't know if my function was not selected. I can't see anymore, but the rest of the script is pretty much the same.
Huh.
Yeah.
So I think the question David had really wanted to ask is if he fed that his script logic newsletter to it, would it do everything right after that?
The goal that I had, like maybe not for V1, but 1 or 2 version after that, yes. Because what I had at the beginning, the way that I trained it to be good was with parsing. So like at the beginning, to be able to figure out, because we all do the same patterns. So when you do an insert from URL, you kind of try to get the error, you try to, that kind of stuff. I could have spent months trying to explain to it, but I built some Python script to do it for me. And then I built some dictionaries and I try to just improve that part just to make it easier for the AI to grab the right thing. So the goal that I really have in mind is to make it smart enough to be able to generate, which is the value that I have right now. But if it can learn from your system, like let's say the first time you go in there, it just goes in and it parses all your scripts. It could technically do that. I just have to put that into it. But when I try to do that, I think it was at the end of March or a week before the end of March, I had a major setback in where I was. I felt like I was ready to release, and then I crashed everything.
Well, I got a lot of legacy stuff where I wouldn't want it to do what I did, but to do what I say. So
yeah. But I think this is where rules are nice, and having some kind of a cache, and this is something that's been brought up multiple times. So the rules help because they can really, if you don't like something, you put it there and it's going to be disabled.
So I mean, because we were talking earlier, like in the social time, that because David Head has this. He said because he has this newsletter, he's sending out these little daily tips on how to do things in a better way.
Yep.
And he said he had all that in a database, right? And I said, well, so if you have all that in a data, you had all these tips in a database, ways you think it should do something. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, somebody like David Head, would he be at a huge advantage being able just to feed that into your?
Yeah, because and I've been careful picking the systems that I've used to to do patterns. I didn't pick an old system that I had laying around with print setup
Yeah.
and lookups and things like that.
Oh.
So
But what I'm
it,
saying is he doesn't have he doesn't necessarily have the actual databases that
no,
you
but the
would be
logic,
looking,
the rules, yeah,
but he has like in text form. He has like what
yep,
would go out in an email. It could
yep,
still process that as well.
absolutely, because
Uh,
like it's multiple stage the way that it's done, and there's a good part of it that's trying to understand what you want to do, what you have selected.
huh.
So, and this is where it would shine. So the part that codes, it codes, and that's what it does, and it does it well. The part that understands, it can forever be better, just like a developer. So, like that's why the better your prompt is with any AI, the better it reacts. So if you have more kind of understanding, like parsing words and understanding methods of when certain steps are
Yeah.
selected, of course, yeah, the output's going to be better. Yeah.
Oh, and then I guess I don't know if you answered this question already, but Ashley was asking, I could use this today. When is it available?
My goal, as of today, is probably April 15th
April
because,
15.
yeah, and the goal is to wrap it up next week because I'm like, I haven't updated my website in a month
Uh,
with what I've showed, and what's on my website is barely half of what I can really do right now. So I really need to update those things, but I really wanted to get it running super well and efficiently, and that's where I am right now. It works, and and I've been working for a week without having to rebuild something, which is the goal. I use it daily for FileMaker development, for web related development, and I can see script appear from something that I've started on Cursor, and I say, hey, you know what? Now that you know how the data is supposed to look, build me the prompt, copy paste, put it in FileMaker, and boom, I have a script. And this is where I start seeing the value because I don't have to rethink anything, and I don't have to re-explain either. This owns the data, it knows FileMaker, and the other one owns the web app. So, and that's kind of the what's next thing that I talked earlier, is to, if I could later on bridge it even more, it would be even better, because if you could be in your web IDE, VS Code, or whatever it is, and it could read the same thing that this can read, then it's completely another level of doing web application. And I think that's kind of a logical next step further on. If you do web apps in FileMaker, obviously.
You gonna give all the DIGFM attendees here a discount code?
Bruno, do you have
Oh,
a
we
waiting
can.
list that you could
I
sign
do
up
have a
on?
waiting list. Yeah, I
Maybe
do
you
have a
could
waiting
post
list.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, on your site. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get over there. What is that?
Presumably, Bruno, you're on the ETS and you seeing what's coming.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
You're on the Claris ETS for FileMaker.
I don't think I got it this year.
Right.
Usually I
Okay.
get it, but I didn't get it. I'm a partner, but I'm, like I said at the beginning of the call with Eric, I'm not very active. I do my own thing in my own corner, and I don't think they send that kind of stuff to me.
So the question would be, are there things that you would like Claris to do with the product that would make your job easier?
I don't think they're going to do anything. That's going to make my job easier.
Oh, you never know.
But to be
Yeah.
honest, it's not so bad. I've had some difficulties doing certain things, and definitely if they could extend like some of the SDK capabilities. But if we're like 5 people building plugins, that's why I'm saying I don't know. But I don't know. I'd have to dig further. I haven't had, like, we were talking about the relationship graph earlier, and I think people have been asking for a revamp of that for a while. So depending on how that is done, I could leverage and probably build relationship.
I mean, I think without talking out of school, Claris have publicly said that they would like to be able to build a full database from XML. And obviously you're using that in the background here to do this stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
So, if with things like, say, you said the custom function stuff, if all the custom functions are available as XML, then that would obviously make your life easier.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Is
So, yep.
a question about is the issue with custom functions is you can't pull them out through the design, and perhaps they're also not available from the plugin API?
Exactly. Yeah, there's no door. There's no door. So you have to. And I didn't spend much time after that. So I could do it, and you wouldn't see the window now. Because I've added a lot of things. So the way that I read script at the beginning, I was selecting doing a manual copy. Now, when you pull the script, it doesn't erase your clipboard. That's a big winner because I was getting pissed. I would have a prompt. I would be ready. I would do add script and would delete my prompt and replace it with a bunch of XML. That was my way at the beginning. And then I updated that. The custom functions right now, I could probably automate it in a way that the window opens and you don't even have time to see it, and it does the work. But it didn't seem so much of a priority anymore because well, for me, I built this for me at the beginning. I have a lot of them, but I don't create new custom functions every 2 minutes. So I import them once in a while. I can use them and reference them. The AI doesn't go crazy, and I'm good to go. So
we could just go to point it at custom functions and website and just have it, hey, if and just go how and import those. Can it do that?
I think it could. If they're XML, yeah, we could, because that's what I pull in. If you copy a list of XML and you click import, I think it's going to work, because the way that it works is that it waits for you to have the custom functions in your clipboard.
Right.
And when you hit OK, it imports. So technically, if you open that window and you go on something else and you pull the list and you paste it there, and you don't paste it, you just copy it and you click OK, it's going to import them.
Yeah.
That's not the nice way of doing it, but yeah.
But I mean, it could easily then keep a library of things like custom functions and
somebody on one of my LinkedIn posts really early on in February asked about that. Yes, yeah, you could have a library of custom functions and be able to put them in. It's not hard to do. Not at this point. It was just not my mission.
What about other plugin calls?
Yeah,
that's the next step. It's on the backlog. I wanted to put MBS first. Because I use it, and even maybe base element. I have it as a task, but I left it in the backlog because it's not, again, super hard to make them into this dictionary.
Huh.
I could probably add them quite easily.
Huh.
So maybe a V1.1 kind of deal.
I think all of us would subscribe to your backlog updates.
Yeah, well, that would be the goal technically. And the way that my mind sees is to see what developers want, and then you rank them by votes, and you go, okay, well, this is more a priority for now. The way that I saw it is like, it needs to work for me, because that was the end goal. I got lost into this for myself, and then the more I'm building, I'm like, oh my god, everybody should use that, because it's going to change the way that they code, and then it can just grow from there and it can expand. And like adding multiple script, it was not on my first version 1, but it needed to be done, because sometimes I need to attach script just for context. The AI is not going to work on all of them. It's going to work on the one that you tell it to work, one at a time for now. But you can attach 4 tabs, and it's going to extract the metadata for all four tabs, which is actually pretty nice. And I just thought of something that I want to show you all. I'm going to take, let's say, this database. I think I can find a script that has a bunch of subscript and just do a test. And this one doesn't have a script. This one has 1. This one has 1. Okay, I'm going to do this one and just like do this. And close this and bring that here. And I'm going to do, okay. Yeah, I used that in the past. It was a nice tool. And you do discovery. This can be fast, sometimes it's slow, but basically what it does is the script that you have open as a tab, the AI is just going to dive in and open all the scripts that are attached to it to the best it can. Sometimes it times out, sometimes it doesn't. It's something that I added, and I was lucky once I was able to pull 14 scripts all at once without clicking, and it attached all of the context that I need and bring it to my window. And then I can ask it for a plan, because it's not going to be able to code. If you give it too much, it's going to end up timing out. But The thought that I have behind that discovery button is like, when you enter a new system or you're working on an old system that you've never worked before and you need to just figure out, okay, what is this? You can just ask for a coding plan and the AI can create that. I'll let it finish. And even if it doesn't code yet, it's just a nice feature to be able to run through like a whole thing. So I have one that didn't go through, but like, I'm going to still do a coding plan.
Just out of curiosity, do you have to let it do its thing before you go off and do something else, or does it
Just for the discovery?
Oh,
For the rest, if you try to apply, and sometimes it takes time. That's an example. And you go on other windows, it's going to grab the front and do what it has to do, and it's not going to interrupt it. But it has to have the priority. Here, because I opened it up on top of another file, it's felt I'm just going to do it again. Because it tried to attach it, but it kept the context of the previous database. I study Asana script. Because working into it, I'm able to navigate the script list. I'm able to select the tab. I'm able to disable things. I'm able to do quite a lot of things in the interface. So the question is not really what can and can't be done. Right now, I'm having trouble with it just because I'm trying to show it, but it's no big deal. I can try to do it again one more time, and if it doesn't work, it's going to be that.
Bruno,
This was just more of a toy. So, yeah.
Bruno,
Sorry,
while you're waiting, you just said I'm able to do a lot of things with the interface.
Mhm.
Are you using what's that thing called? System events to script the interface in the Mac platform, or using some plugin functionality to script when you say I can do a lot of things with the interface?
It's all accessibility directly from the native class of what's exposed in the FileMaker process. So because I'm within FileMaker process, I can do it. You can do it via the system events. And I have a CLI that I've created, which is the first demo that I did for that. So here, like it did attach, like it grabbed the other workspace, which is kind of funny. So it's
so you can do it internal to the FileMaker application process.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
and that is by virtue of the plugin?
Yeah, it's one of the good reason why it's nice to have the plugin. And I have my CLI over here, which is kind of a discovery project, which is like, okay, well, tell me which window is active, and it can like what's the function for the active script? I don't remember active script. And it can tell me which script is active. I can go to line 25, and it's gonna. Whoops, I didn't write it right. Go to line. Let's go to the line 25, I guess. And it's gonna select the line like this. I can do pretty much everything.
So you can basically traverse the script steps within a script.
Yeah, I created a new script here.
Okay.
I can do select script as well, which is why like the limit. And which is part of the thing that I talked really early at the beginning for the kind of the agentic flow, is that with proper code and testing, I could make it work multiple things. I can make it navigate scripts. I can make it select tabs. I can make it disable things. I can paste stuff at certain things. And disable line 14.
You've got a lot of the tools of the 2Empower FM developer assistant built into this. Right? The people would use that plugin instead. A lot of it you can do right here. Yeah?
Yeah.
Bruno, you're familiar with that? You're familiar with the 2Empower?
No, not at all.
Well, that's a tool a lot of us have depended on to help like make it scan through any kind of code, scripting or scheme or whatever to find searches on and other things.
Okay.
I think they have a free demo, and it's worth looking at. And I use it extensively, occasionally.
Yeah, I'm sure he could bring a lot of that functionality into here all in one place.
Yeah, there's so much. So like that CLI was the first test that I did to save my clipboard. I was like, there's a way, and this one connects to the FileMaker process the same way the plugin does. So it's built with the same thing as the plugin, and because I can do it very natively here, I'm like, I'm just going to do it the same way with the plugin, and that CLI is basically kind of the core of the engine that it exposed, because I can create scripts, I can select lines, I can move tabs, so if I had the proper brain to kind of like the real agentic coding, like Codex, Cursor, or Cloud Code, all those things is properly set up, and has access to those tools and know how to use the FileMaker, it can go berserk and can create multiple scripts. It can do a bunch of things. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Can you
So
do this
Bruno,
on? Sorry, real quick. Can you do this on the Windows platform, or is this a Mac only plugin?
Yeah, for now it's a Mac. It's a Mac only.
Okay.
I didn't try on Windows. I use Windows for not much. So I do have a PC. I use it for a lot of my agentic workflow when I code. But I don't use FileMaker on PC. I'm pretty sure you could, but it's not going to be as effective because of the accessibility that the Mac offers with the plugin. I don't know. I didn't check.
How proficient does somebody have to be with the CLI in order to use this, or do you?
Not at all. Well, the CLI you don't have to worry about it. It's in there. So the CLI is I showed it because you can type in whatever you need, but you dump the plugin and everything is done here. So and I try to remove as many buttons as possible. When you go on the website and you look at the screenshot and the feature list, you get busy. I had a bunch of buttons to remove certain things. I'm like, for like the pre-flight question was one of the things. Right now it's just built in. If the system needs to ask you a question, it's going to ask you a question, and you can answer them, and it's gonna be buttons, or there's going to be a text field for you to put in. So it's a matter of just you have it there. Add selection selects the active tabs. If you have, and that's one thing. If you don't want to work for the entire script, you select a couple of lines and you do add selection. It's going to gather only those lines only. So, and that's for targeted edit without having to send everything. It's actually pretty cool. If you have one line, it knows that you want the whole script. If you do add script, it just adds whatever you have here, but you can remove all of them, and it just navigates through like all of the tabs.
So
and it fetch like everything that it needs, and then it goes back to the interface, and then you type in, you ask questions, you ask for plans, you ask for code, you ask for whatever you want. And if you want to remove a script, but you can just remove one script. There was also something that a lot of other people have done. I've seen it on Proof Chat. I've seen it. The DB services released something like to make a SQL query there. I did put it in because it's just fun, and it was super easy to do because I'm already playing with the SQL. So you can create charts if you want. It's not super useful. You can export. There's one thing that's actually useful is exporting raw JSON if you want to go ahead and create something else. But the main modes are code. If you go in data, there is a warning because you can actually delete fields with that. So before you do any request, it's going to prompt you again. You can modify tables, you can generate new tables, you can delete tables, you can delete fields, and ask it's just kind of a lighter mode. You can try to just like create me a plan to, I don't know, or just like debugging scripts. Like this mode is just more for debug, of like running through, but you can still go without this button. This button is just because it gives you a PDF at the end if you want to send that over to for whatever reason. The goal for me for this mode was just you attach way too many scripts, and there's a pre-parsing happening before it goes to the AI to not send, I don't know, 300,000 tokens, and then it costs you $2 to debug a script, and you got to start saving your money. But ask mode, you can ask any FileMaker question. You turn on the web mode if you want to get any documentation or whatever. You can get explanations from there. So just like basic questions, but mostly put code, click on 2-3 buttons, and you prompt, and that's it. And then you click apply, and it does what it has to do. It's quite straightforward, to be honest. So now it's creating coding plans. So here's like a big thing. So we went across everything, key finding, I'm not saying everything is important there. Those scripts were pretty okay, but I know some of those scripts had poor error handling. I saw them. I don't remember which one, but some of them had like a blank. But just a good way to just get a picture of something, and then it like a coding plan of what to do, and then there's like you can click PDF, and it's just going to say PDF of that you can view. Super pretty PDF of. I don't remember what I think I did the PDF because I needed to send something to someone, and I didn't want to write it down. But yeah, so you got a good way of doing analysis as well within that, without having to bring it outside, which is kind of another cool thing. It rears the data plot. Sometimes you don't have to do it, but I'm going to give you an example. I was doing a script earlier where I wanted to just almost reproduce the metadata explorer that I have over there, that just parse all table, all layouts, and so on, but in a script. And I was having trouble with some of the native FileMaker execute SQL statements to pull the field, the fields and the field name and so on. And I went into Ask mode with a web search with Gemini, and it was better. I got something, and then I switched to code. And because you asked the question before, you have a pre-context that the AI can use to better do the task. So kind of details that can help. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what it is. It's a nice little tool.
Yeah.
To answer my own question, I think that third parties like yourself and Clay and people, companies like that should be producing these tools because you're far more agile than Claris is, and you have far more direct contact with the real world in terms of development. So I suppose my ask from Claris would be that they're far, far more responsive to people like yourself and saying, I want to be able to do this, and FileMaker doesn't let me because you don't give me access to this. And then they're the ones should be enabling this stuff. So they can enable all of this stuff and say, so now we've allowed third-party developers to produce a plugin that does all of the AI stuff. They shouldn't be doing this.
There's one thing, you make me think of something that there's a function that I just didn't think of using, which was stupid. It was it field names that produce, not field names. There's one that produced the list of fields available on the layout. And I wanted to add that in.
Field names.
Okay. And by doing that, the minute you select a layout, I'd be able to see if there's something missing. It's not really useful when you do FileMaker actual scripting. When you do a lot of FileMaker data API, it's actually pretty useful. And that's probably why I didn't do it at the beginning. But I think it would be a nice have because it would take 1 millisecond more, and I'd have even more context of everything. And you could probably select a layout instead of, because when you have 500 table occurrences, there's a lot of search going on. And when you have like 500 fields. Like there's a few things that I thought of like adding a filter to remove the calculation, because I've added icons to show text on store calculation, globals, things like that. And if you have a lot of stuff right now, there's almost nothing. So you can search and it's going to show up at the time. But if you have like 25 registration or invoice table occurrence, it can get pretty nasty. But if I were able to select a layout and filter those fields from there, and it would select automatically the right table occurrence, I think that would be kind of a gain that I could have. But yeah, you're right. Most of the stuff I'm unable to do, or that took me a long time, is because I had to fight, because there's absolutely no documentation. You just wing it. And my thought was, Christian at MBS did it. I mean, like, there was a copy script button. I should be able to do something with that. So yeah, that's mainly what I did. But it's going to change as it evolves, I think, and it gets released as well. When people get active on it, there's going to be more effort. Right now, I'm building it and building something else, building something else, working on a task, and I'm just going all by myself, trying to figure out, okay, is this worth it? I have a lot of good feedbacks from a few people that have been in touch since the beginning. Charles at Clay has been one of them, giving me good feedbacks on certain things, and like the project here with the rules, all him. I'm going to give him credit because I didn't think of it, because I was the only one using it, and the script that it produced kind of matched my style a little bit, because it's how not all of them, but some of them. But like just talking with you, I'm glad I had that feature, because you're able to kind of tweak the system to go a certain way if you want to. So, but yeah,
So are you talking to Christian Schmitz? Okay.
No, I didn't talk to him. I should, because it would have probably saved me a lot of hours.
Another pitch to get him at full access, because he will be there along, hopefully, with Clay. Hopefully.
All right, it's a pretty neat system. I think when it gets out, like, and it's at a point right now, as I said, most of the code gets in. When you get into really complicated stuff, it can make mistakes. But there's a bunch of repair modules that, like, if the code that you receive, like, there's a loop, but it doesn't have that go to next record or that exit loop or something, it's going to try to catch those things, and the system is going to inject those missing steps. It's because the LLM can still make mistakes no matter how good the prompt is. And I think having it as bringing your own key makes it low cost to use, because, like, of course, I'm going to have probably to sell this. I would like to give it for free to everybody if I could. But, like, not having to sell tokens at a crazy amount because I have to bundle the knowledge somewhere else. Like, the knowledge is in there and it's well governed at the right place. And you could look at whatever the logs are, as I said earlier, but it's going to give you some pieces. But, like, I don't think the magic is really the good integration into how it's plugged into FileMaker, and the further I can integrate it into FileMaker, the more I'm going to be able to do, like, better things. I would like eventually if I could do a layout. I think I could, because honestly, I was looking really, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I wanted to bring it in here, because I'm like, it's not going to be hard, because now I know how to properly attach it to a window. I know how to get it to generate and autocomplete, so I could make it generate calculation, but at the same time, I didn't see the value, because I can just take an empty script and ask it to write me a calculation, and it just dumps it there. So eventually, I guess, if I could, my goal was really to just put it almost as a copilot. I add I think on my website it's there, but I had a quick code, which was a quick button to do quick request. And most of the time it would work for really tiny things, but it was lacking so many things that I would rather have it, like, have the interface open. But, like, yeah, there's tons of ideas that gets into my brain, and I'm trying to tame them a little bit, because not all of them are really great. Well, some of them are great, but too complicated to bring into life. So because I don't have all those access, I have to do a really huge deep dive every time that I add a feature in the interface, if I should say.
Incredible work. I'm impressed. I'm beyond impressed.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
That's the scariest demo I've seen in 30 years as a FileMaker guy. Straight up.
Is that a good thing?
Wow.
I mean, yeah, in the big picture, I suppose so, but this is going to have to be reckoned with. I'm going to have to process this for sure. And I can't wait to get my hands on it.
For me, I'm going to show you just a few. It's nothing crazy, and nothing that's confidential. But, like, I've been doing some old, and that's something I'm going to allow people, I think, to change. But right now, I make all the scripts with Jenny in front of them, so I can find them. But I generated those are all kind of loading data for a web portal, and I didn't code a single line of these things. None of them. They're all prompts. And this is a web app I did on Cursor, and I didn't do a single thing. All of it. Like, I have to correct all those disable or errors that I probably face somewhere, but, like, all these things, they're all AI. I have to prompt them to do the right thing. But I built stuff in the past week and a half with this that I know would have taken me hours. And it's not hours because it's that complicated. It's just sitting down okay, I need this, I need to do that. But and sometimes I'm able to process it in words, and I know which field I need to use. I know where it needs to go, but I don't want to create 5 scripts. I don't want to, and, like, I can just bunch them. And especially when I move from, I think the really hard part is moving from, you're in Cursor or could be in Clay. Clay has an outstanding AI, and you're just, like, looking at, like, components appear in your face, functions appear out of thin air. You run it, and it works, and then you go back into FileMaker and you want to create your backend, and you're like, ah, shit, and I have nothing. What do I do? And I add that for that system, for the few scripts that I showed you, I have a Python API. I've coded a bunch of things in Python to do much of the heavy work, but I wanted to give it a try because I know FileMaker scripting for gathering information sometimes is faster than the data API going on the layout and fetching and doing the work. But I like there's some things that works better a certain way. So I did it all via script, and I told the AI to like make it a certain format because that's what Cursor is expecting. And then I did the script. I showed the script to Cursor. Cursor was like, oh, okay, and they adjusted all the things, and it. In a matter of like 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours, I had an entire backend done, and I had a bunch of bugs to fix after that, like in the web. But everything loaded, and I was like, oh my god, I did that in a day, and that's really the value that I can see. Like I barely tried, but I'm pulling all of those information right now in FileMaker for Asana, so I could create the opposite, and then I can create those bridge that like. You don't have to go read the API and figure it out and automate. You can just, if you explain it well enough, it's kind of good and it goes up. And if you don't know how to explain it well enough, ask an AI to make the prompt and dump it there, and you'll be amazed. Like sometimes that's a good way. You can ask one AI to build the prompt and then use that prompt on a native AI. I've had great success with that personally, a lot for a lot of things that I've built. So that's I don't do it often there, but it helps. It really helps.
So Bruno, you have another product you were going to share?
Yeah, if we have time, it's just a fun. Well, it's a fun thing. I just created this quick web app. It's running local on my machine, and I was doing comparison of a database. And like, no offense to like what we have out there, like the tools for like FM perceptions and FM compare, they're great. But for this specific database, I was having a lot of false positive for I don't know, IDs or things like that. And so I created that via prompt, and I kind of recreated the entire FM compare. And the reason why I want to show it is just because I didn't spend hundreds of hours doing that. I think total, maybe I 15 hours to build all of that. This is like Vue.js with Python backend. So it's done on web. It's not FileMaker based, but it's FileMaker related. And then what I wanted to do is to push it, and this is where I'm going, is to when a layout or a script is being updated, you can manually look at the difference. And I'm like, well, I have AI for that. So why not just ask the AI? And this is where I'm going right now is I have the AI. I know how to talk to the AI. So what if I can bring the XML, the DDR, and make the AI? Now, I think this one is still running local because I'm mirroring the fans on my machine, so I'm not sure it's going to show anything. But the concept is really AI everything, almost. I'm at that point where I know if things are properly set up and the AI is probably targeted to the right task, it can give you what you want. So my goal was really just like be able to find what I need to find in a second. The best part was when I was trying to figure out in a really old system a non-store calculation, and I created this graph to just introspect and see, okay, this is the calculation I care about. And now because my desktop is on a really huge resolution, I don't see much. I'm sorry if it's too small, but I wanted to see what it touched, so I can see all the tables, all the nodes that it touched, and like I could see kind of at a real quick glance what's happening. I could extract it as JSON as well, like as a raw like this, and I could just dump it in an AI, and I could ask it, what do you think about that? What's the best method to refactor this? Where do I start? Because I have all the nodes. Because I've built that graph, all I need is the question. I don't want to have to think about it. That's kind of the approach I have with this. So it's still really new because I haven't worked much on it, but it really helped for the few things that I wanted to do. So I wanted to be able to do compare specific modules. I was able to do that. And I was able to check, I think, 3 or 4 on store calculation and get it right away and get the graph right away. The problem that I had with the other tools that are available is I had to do a lot of manual digging. And I told you at the beginning of the meeting, the more you use AI, the more things are kind of appearing faster. Well, I think the more lazy you can get. And I think also you could just ask yourself if there's a more efficient way of doing it. So it's not related at all for now to the other one, but it's a cool thing. But so yeah, it timed out here because I'm pretty sure it's running local on my machine, but that's not a big deal. But it could answer like summaries, and I'm trying to build tools to, like, if I ask it a question like, okay, what field does this script touches, or what was modified, and so on. So that's kind of the goal. I'm using either the XML or the DDR, and the Explorer just gives me kind of I can get kind of a GitHub view of changes in a script. If I go into text, I can have, well, is it an updated script? Yeah. So it's just kind of like a broad view and a faster view maybe of what we have out there. So yeah, it was just kind of an exploration project that I wanted to show, because I think it's just a way to prove that if just the right path, you can build things kind of quickly, especially with the way it's evolving. And if you guys have been seeing everything that comes around in the FileMaker community, there's so many new tools, but yeah. So this is one here with, like, it shows me the difference, what's been deleted at what line and so on. So when I want to go and look at specific things, I have an easier look. But right now I'm really focusing on putting the energy on the AI, and making sure that I don't even have to go there, because I don't want to go there. Like I get the Explorer, but I don't really care. I know what I want to find usually, or I want to go in and get a report, and that's kind of the mind I'm putting into that. Oh yeah, I mean, that's kind of just a side project. I got lost. I needed something one day, and I decided to build a system for it. So that's
Wow.
the other project.
Does
Michael,
this?
you're on mute.
Oh, go ahead.
Michael's talking, but he's on mute.
Sorry about that. When I said before that this was a scary demo, this is what I was afraid of. And I say this without any bitterness or anything, but just recognizing that this is where we're at. One small part of what you just showed that you made in 15 hours obsoleted a project I've been working on for almost 6 years.
I'm sorry.
It's like not something to apologize for. It's just, to me, it's
Yeah.
I'm awed. It's an amazing step forward. It's like
Yeah.
everybody is going to be able to do this stuff now.
This is just stuff that Bruno does when he's bored. Oh my God.
Yeah, when I stay up late.
You got long winters there or what?
Oh my God.
No, it's I get frustrated when like the tool. I've seen a few things come out recently. I'm like, oh my God, I built that for. I had the same realization. There was I don't remember the name, but I saw it. There's a guy who just released a local tool that you can have on your computer to parse the FileMaker server log. And it's kind of useful, and I've been integrating that into this, because I've created that a while ago in a Metabase database to just kind of understand all the logs, but not understand all the logs, but connect them to your DDR and have the field name, the username, and everything. And I'm converting that, because right now it's running on the SQL server. It's super slow, but I'm bringing that into this. But I know which field at what time. I have like a huge visualization of what the system is, and I can tell in a second what's running on the server, which script is slow and why, and I know how many remote calls it does. And when I introspect, because the way that I build this, the way that I can introspect is I know which script use unstore field, unstore calculation, bad things, because I have like a design of like, what's the worst field in the system, and I gave them score based on what they reference and so on. So this I'm bringing into that FM Fox, because it's already in there, but I don't think it works. Like, and it's ugly because I didn't put any energy into it, but I think it was in there. Yeah, performance, and I'm bringing all those views in because that work is already done, but it's displayed in their locally hosted app. And I know some people are already coming with those solutions, but those things are missing. They're like I've looked to find I like those solutions to figure out what's really hurting my system? How do I we all have an idea, but I don't want to deep dive. Like I do the deep dive first, but then I want answers. And that's that kind of the idea behind the FM Fox project is to get it to that point, because I've done it for the logs. And this system, what I did is it logs into the console. It does parse the log at night, and it ports them and it combines them, whatever. And once in a while, I just give it a DDR to update the name of the fields. And if some of them are disabled and so on, I remove them. I also keep which layouts are worse based on like the amount of calculation there is. I did kind of set basic parameters on my end, but those are kind of the things that I feel like we should have. And well, I need them when I work. When somebody asks me, "Hey, can you find what's lagging on a server for whatever reason?" Well, I wish, but I don't have anything, and I'm definitely not going to read a log. I'm not going to read a log. So yeah. So
Bruno,
that's another thing here.
Bruno, question: the table that you're displaying there a moment ago, you said server log. Are we talking about the top call?
Yeah, you have the top calls. You have the client stab. They're over here.
So
I have the top calls.
The output that you showed, is that are you feeding it all, or are you keying off one specific? Perhaps the top
right now,
call?
The database, I think I have like 5 months history, but then I make average, and I also have dashboards or when I make a change. So when we update something, and this is a data API log. I'm going to give you an idea. So those are data API logs, but I design a system that uses the data API on that server, and I built it in a way that every function and every script that it calls, it separates. So I know at what time what runs. And I know I can check, well, if I optimize this payload, I know it runs. We were looking at the time for what lags between 2 and 4. And at the beginning, I'm like, well, the system always lagged. And I figured out it was my own fault because we created an API with too many people on it that leverage a find request in one of the worst tables of the system. But without this visualization, I would have never been able to catch it. And that's I have client stat, data API, server events. I care less because that's kind of a different niche. Server stat, I like to see what happened at given time, and then I can make like a correlation of everything, and see what lags the most, because those are server logs, and then most of the rest is analysis of the system, trying to figure out. Those are, if I'm not mistaken, those are server stats. Trying to figure out if is the lag the system, the server, the network, all those kinds of things. And Metabase was great at the beginning, but like when I'm trying to load like 30 days of information, that's what it does. And I have to wait. And it's probably because it's running locally as well. That's a bad example. If it was hosted, it'd be better. But yeah, I create like dashboards of like, okay, when we added this, well, this I have probably less logs than this, and I can monitor things and see how they evolve. So if we do something, we can see the impact, measure the impact. It doesn't mean that the impact is like directly linked, but yeah, it's just an analysis tool that's going to be integrated into that. And I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but it's pretty useful. So gives you answer like right away.
Looks nice. I think I think one of the most complicated logs to get information out of is the top call, due to the nature of the periods overlap.
Yeah.
And that would benefit from some algorithmic processing and some algorithmic visualization.
I think you can. Yeah, you can, because you can figure out. There's another session or something in there that kind of. But you have to kind of link it to another log to figure out if they're kind of related.
Yeah, because they overlap.
Yeah, I agree. It's very hard. It gives you an idea, but it doesn't give you the right picture unless you look at a really tiny moment. When you look at it like broad like this, you get what you get. So
interesting.
Yep. So those are the two other things. This one has been done for a while. It's still running, but this is the second project, and the goal is just to bring it all in there. And to be able to monitor the performance of the solution, see the difference, and track multiple versions. I know there was a bunch of things to do that, but when I go ahead and I want to work on an unstore calculation, I go there. I can see the graph, and honestly, the graph is nice visually, but I don't really look at it. I'm going to get more of the JSON that's in it, and then I'll ask an AI, and I'll work from there. So my goal is to stop having to do copy paste there as well, and to be able to just jump into a system, be able to do a deep dive manually, I think is useful, but be able to go in and have the AI have the proper tools to know where to go, to know what to do, because those are quite easy to build. When you know, if you know what you're building, it's kind of easy. So give it the proper tools, and then just asking a question. What happened yesterday between that and that? And getting an answer, not having to do 2 hours of work to figure it out. Did this employee log in yesterday? Yes, he did. Just a lazy way. So those are my 2 projects.
Cool.
I'm blown away. Great stuff.
Well, okay, so I don't know. Is there any kind of AI race going on in the FileMaker community where there's other things kind of like this that are
I've seen other things, I think, that can generate script. I don't think I'm the first one to do generations of scripts.
Yeah, we've seen a few demos, but they weren't like this quite. They were like, the demos really was kind of shocking us because it just did it, and it wasn't any copying and pasting, and so that was.
Oh, it's the best part.
Yeah,
It
it looks more like magic actually because it's.
Yeah. Trust me, it wasn't like that at the beginning. but when it starts doing it, and it starts doing it right, and you pick up the pace, because you can, like, if you use you're going to use other tools, and that's fine. But I think if you have your project and you know where you're going, and you go step by step, and you can make those steps talk to each other, because you just build the script that's going to call another one, and it reads that script, it knows how to formulate the parameter, creates a new one, and call it correctly. You're like, yes, oh goddamn, yes. And you didn't leave FileMaker. That's the kind of, and it loads it like just like AI. I mean, I use 5.4 a lot sometimes when I do a lot of planning, and it loads for a long time to not give me much. This doesn't, like, depending on, I personally run on 5.1. It's cheap. It's reliable enough. There's a bunch of models that I listed in there that I should probably remove. Trying to code on 5 mini is quite fun. You're gonna wait, but the goal is, like, before that thing was really something that would just merge into one. But I like to have a model for coding. And you can put something really stronger here, or you can do the opposite, put a lighter model for coding, but the logistic and the gathering of the information can be stronger. And you'll have different result. It depends what you want to pay. Because if you put 5.4 here, the logistic of the planning, of the understanding, is going to be much deeper, and maybe you'll get a better payload for the coding. So it's kind of fun to play around, and it's fun to have the choice. I left all the models over there. I had custom at the beginning in there. I had to remove it. I want to bring it back. Because I at first, before my first presentation, when Matt Navarre told me, well, it's going to cost you $10, you should try on ChatGPT. And I was on at that time it was FM Better Form. We were on a Friday Live. I showed very early version. I didn't have all that interface. It was really ugly kind of C++ interface. And I was running it on an LM Studio, and it was doing code. It was poor, but it was doing code locally, and it was spinning. And then I tried my system on OpenAI, and I'm like, oh God, it works. And it works fast. And then I kept on digging with OpenAI, and then I expanded to the other AI, because I realized at the beginning I wanted something really local, but I didn't have the plan to make this into what it is now. But when I started using that ugly AI chat with a real model, I started realizing, oh God, okay, I think there's something that can be built here, because I'm already in the interface. I didn't have all the bridge, but I had the copy paste implemented really well, and I was already exploring the goal of having it right. And so I like the thought of seeing, like, scripts are just going to appear in front of my eyes. And like if doing FileMaker used to be faster than doing anything else, and it's not the case anymore, which is weird. And now I feel like it's a little bit back because scripting in FileMaker is super simple, but it can be longer than just like doing a JavaScript functions. It's going to get generated almost perfectly because all the models know JavaScript. So that's kind of the thought.
Yeah, I think FileMaker has a lot of competitive advantages to the web apps. It is true, I'll agree, Bruno, that I think the artificial intelligence works better with these text-based platforms. And I think FileMaker, due to its nature, like you can't programmatically generate the relationship graph, as John was asking earlier. That all said, there's nooks and crannies in the FileMaker platform that I think basically crush a web app.
You know, it was interesting is last year, there was one of the people I trained to do FileMaker development years ago. He was doing his own thing in one of the academic departments while he was doing some accounting stuff, and he wanted to do some basketball score, basketball league tracking system that he wanted to build, and he asked even back then, I think he asked ChatGPT, how to build it. And it was interesting is it actually produced, and I don't even know where it got the information. It produced the graph and a picture, and it looked just like what you would do on a relationship graph. And I said, how did it even know how to do it? Because I don't even know how you kind of explain that and to an AI system and then have it be able to regurgitate some, it's not regurgitating, it's actually thinking about your problem and then actually creating a relationship graph with keys and right where named properly and connecting right where you would expect them to be. And it was already doing that last year, but only in pictorial form. You would actually have to do it manually, but
it would be better not to draw it for me. I don't like if I have the interface, like all I need, and if I were to open it and spend too many nights on it, and I would probably figure it out how to do it with the mouse, with the control. Could probably do it. It's not going to be efficient because it's going to be slow, and while it doesn't, you're stuck. It would be best if I could do it in the back, but I could probably do it, and I don't have to have the graph. I need to have the connection. I've seen spaghetti graphs like on apps sometimes that just work, but it's ugly. So if it could just spin up and put it all in a corner and it works, well, it's not going to do it if I have to do it with mouse. Going to have to create some distance, but basically all it needs to do is be able to understand which key goes to where, and then in the interface, all the FileMaker dialog, I can parse what's written in there pretty easily. Just like the MBS search bar is enabled all over the place, even in the graph. So whenever you see that MBS search bar, if you have MBS, I can act there. So I think it's doable, but it's not something that it's going to be native enough. It's going to feel like you've tried to force it onto the system. I would have to go in deep dive and see how much time does it really save. If I start from scratch, probably. If I go from an existing system, probably not, depending on how huge it is, because there's already too much going on trying to figure out. And that's just a thought. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but if I had a way to do it in the back, everybody agrees. They're like, you could do it from any other ways. Like, can we do it from OData? Can we do it from the API? And I know you can do it like from the patch tool, I think, but again, you have to put the database down and download everything.
Someone without a microphone. I'm sorry, someone without a microphone, I think, is asking a question. Can the FileMaker patch tool create relationships? I don't know. Anyone know that?
I would think it does, but I don't know.
The plugin can, right? Like when you have an add-on, it can add on bits. So I would imagine that it's the same thing.
You're right. Yeah, I think it can, but it's not efficient.
Yeah, my if anyone, the team of people over at FileMaker who are dedicated to watching every DIGFM video, for them, I would say that the adding more and more code objects that you can paste, including relationship graph, privilege sets, and layouts themselves to supplement layout objects would be awesome.
Yeah. Layouts, you can paste objects. I did one earlier today, a layout just for test. It was so heavy. It was so heavy. And I got something that was ugly at the end of the day. So I
Bruno,
ended
you
up
mentioned
just stripping fields.
Bruno, you mentioned something, many things very interesting. One in particular about when your plugin, because it's operating within the FileMaker application space, has direct access to the usability interface that you can see through Xcode. And and you're focused on scripts. And earlier you mentioned, layouts. It's not where you're going. You've got your hands full with the scripting. Have you looked to see if the accessibility that you see in the scripting is also available in other zones, the FileMaker development zones, like
most of it, yeah.
Like even some I would think would be outside the scope, but just changing the settings and layouts would be interesting anyway. I thought that was very interesting. I'll have to look into that a little bit.
So the beauty of the script workspace, the difference between all the other interface, I think everything is at the same place. So you don't have to pop open anything. So I could technically do it from a layout, but you would see the system do this, and you see this appear, and then you'd see this go away.
Well, and that wouldn't be bad because, for instance, one of the things that I like to do with the system is there's the 3 check boxes. Is it a form view? Is it a list view? Is it a table view?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Exactly that one. I looked at that through the system events and also through the accessibility code, and it was a little wonky. But scripting the user interface to me is something that you can do with FileMaker. If they made it easier, that would also make the platform even more awesome than it already is.
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. Like the real advantage. So technically, I could do that from the CLI that I showed earlier in the terminal because it's using that bridge. The plugin, the real advantage that I have is that you don't have to, because the CLI I had to grant an additional accessibility and a permission to read into FileMaker. But the plugin you don't. It just and you can read. It's kind of granted.
I'd imagine you can read the layout name, and you could read the underlying table occurrence and so forth and so on.
Yeah, that I do already, I believe. I'm not sure the layouts if I have the table name on there.
By the way, I dropped a link about the field names function. There's a gotcha, so I went out to Grok to get their answer easier than typing. What's the gotcha when using the field name functions? Because it either returns the fields on the layouts or the fields that are underneath the layout. And the gotcha is how you name your layouts. And it's in the link if people hit the 3 dots.
Yep.
It's something I see a lot out there. Save the chat.
No, I think I can close that up. I think I can stop sharing. I've shown I've done a good parse.
You gave everyone a lot to think about.
Yeah.
A lot to wait for.
Yeah, hopefully not too long. I've been really working hard on this to make it good enough because I didn't see the value of launching something that would not generate. Like you imagine you get it, you open it up, you prompt, and it says, now there's an error, or you paste and it nothing is lined up. So I really spend the time to making it right and making sure that if it's useful for me, it's going to be useful for everybody. Because a lot of people said, well, you go fast, you go this. I have certain expectation with the way that AI is because I use it a lot for a lot of other things. I'm not there. I'm far from what Codex can do. I'm not Codex for FileMaker, but it's very efficient. I think it's at a point where it's efficient enough, and it's going to make mistakes. But I can at this point, it's a really good. It's a good V1, and we can just build better on top of that at this point, which is nice. In the past weeks, months, it was a lot of, let me have this because I need this, and then breaking everything that was right just for the sake of, it doesn't know how to do a while function properly. That's not going to slip. That kind of that's a bad example because it has a good dictionary now, but adding the autocomplete when you type for me was important, especially not for the FileMaker step, not that much, but if you really if you don't want to use case, you can tell it to use many ifs. and being able to tag your tables and your fields and search them in the chat. Because as I said, if your prompt is good, code's going to be good. If you don't reference any field by name and you just say put it in the task field, but your field is called CAC because it's mislabeled, there is a chance the AI is going to miss it. It could miss it. It shouldn't, but there's a possibility. And having to type long table occurrence name and fields, now you press the dash key and boom, good to go. So those kind of like net picky details that makes it great and really fast to use are actually the things that have been setting me back every time. So I'm happy that now it's at a point where it's good to go. You see, the discovery mode, I'm probably going to look into it tomorrow, figure out why it failed to attach, but it was not even on the feature list at the beginning. It's something that I coded because I needed to do a deep dive on that specific day. So having the ability, if you open 12 tabs and you do add script, it's going to grab those 12 scripts like already. So just a thought.
It's I've found a big problem with ChatGPT producing while statements for me. It just can't do them. It can't understand the syntax for some reason. It puts the variables in the wrong order, puts the things in the wrong order, and then you say, no, isn't that the wrong syntax? And it says, sure, this is the syntax for a while statement, and here's the while statement, and it's got all of the initiating variables and things in the wrong order.
If you want to solve that, find 2 or 3 of your most nastiest, gnarliest custom functions and say, use these as syntax references, and that problem disappears.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Looking at some of the questions on here. So for building an interface for FileMaker web viewer, no. Michael, you said that. I would use another AI to do the web viewer interface, to do the web code, but then you can use that web viewer and tell the FileMaker script to just, okay, there's a web viewer, the name is there on that layout, it expect that format, feed it, and it's going to create the script to feed the information for you. So, and that's the kind of point. I don't want to bring web development into the thing. It's not for that. But like my biggest next step, honestly, from what I've been doing for the past week, is having it connect to a cursor. Because if cursor would know those fields, those layouts, those scripts, and all those things, or see what script is open right now, it would save me so much time, because I'm building I'm building a Python script, or I'm building an HTML or JavaScript or whatever. It would be able to reference and work in that. So if the bridge is well done, I think it can just get more exciting from there. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't waste time doing Windows. Just give more for Mac. No, I didn't want to say it, but
You can do more with the Mac. It's just a fact. The Mac gives you access to things that the Windows platform does not.
Who really uses Windows to code? Is there anybody here that like it's all Windows and that's what you prefer?
Yeah, there's one.
Okay, John. You should have. You said a lot at the beginning of the call where you were having arguments with the AI. You should ask the AI, what's better, FileMaker for Mac or FileMaker for Windows, and see what it does.
You're muted, John.
Windows is good if you're using the QuickBooks plugin. There's a little bit of love for the Windows platform.
I've got nine Windows machines in front of me and 3 Macs, but I end up with a lot of my customers on Windows, so I am doing a lot of work.
No, but I agree. I have most of my customers have Windows servers. Like I have a tower here where like all the web app that I've shown are hosted there. All my Dockers are there. I do a lot of codecs over there. I do a lot of things on Windows, but FileMaker itself, the FileMaker Pro client, I can't. I don't know why. Like I've never been able. I don't know if it's their shortcut or the fact I'm no longer used to Windows, but I feel like it's less responsive. And especially if you do, it's been better in the past years. But if you do a lot of web viewers, my God, you gotta double test everything because you open a popover and it shows under the web viewer and like the user's complaining that they can't search, all that kind of stuff.
Bruno, are you using Macs for servers? Are you on Windows or are you on Ubuntu? What are you using for servers?
Well, most people I have are Windows servers.
Yeah,
Windows servers, yeah.
WimDecourt would approve of that.
I like Windows Server. It's easy to maintain, and like I use my Windows machine, like I said, for a lot of things, but for like all of that coding, just Mac is just better.
I just recently installed a Mac Mini server with the M4, the latest Mac Mini for a client. We had all kinds of headaches. We had to keep reinstalling it right over the top, and that was 2025, the latest version, right? V4. Yeah, no, I'd much prefer being on Windows servers, but now I'm going to move more to Mac on coding.
Oh.
So Linux is making progress, inroads on the server side from what I've seen.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I guess
I have,
applications are clouds based on it.
Yeah, WebDirect on, I don't know how it is now with the new update that they've made for Windows, but when they first released the Ubuntu version or server ad, somebody was using a 100% WebDirect app, and they released Nginx at the time, the other web engine. WebDirect was like twice as fast on Ubuntu. I don't know if it is like that anymore. I have no idea.
WebDirect's pretty fast no matter how you use it compared to FileMaker because you don't have to load that all the elements.
I don't know how it is anymore, but like I've seen so much lags. Like, I think it's much better now. They've made a lot of improvement on WebDirect in the past years.
I brought my my web hosting in-house 2-3 years ago, and I've been on Debian, which I never had much experience with. And boy, would I like it if everything was hosted on Linux. It's been like a dream. It's been so wonderful. Most of my clients, like all of you, are on Windows servers, and Debian is just stable. Once you got everything kind of ironed out, it just runs. I rarely have to think about it.
Yeah. I've got a question here for Ashley who says, I don't know if she's still on the call. I think she left. She was saying if like subscription seems to be cheaper. Subscription seems to be cheaper than API tokens. AI do not paste in. Could I generate script in Cloud and paste? If the AI does not generate it, if AI generates code that you can paste on Mac, it's because the code is bad. So because you don't need a plugin to paste anymore. You can just, if the XML is good, you just paste with the new version of macOS, and it creates a script. It's the copy that's and even copy. I think if you copy most of the time on your web IDE, so you don't really need a plugin anymore on Mac. And I don't think API tokens, especially like with ChatGPT 5 or something like that, is more expensive than a subscription. I think that's it. Yeah, I think that covers all the questions. I went up the list just to see what we missed. Yeah, that's good. Any preview for the pricing? I have no idea. I have no idea where I'm going with this. It was never my goal at the beginning to make something like this. It ended up being that. But like I said, I think it's ready to roll. So next week, like most of next week, things are going to come out, and I'll try to make more announcement on like it. What do I do? How do I put it out?
You're not going to go to the marketplace. You're just going to sell it directly from your site, right? Like a cart?
Well, I think we can do both. Yeah, I'm probably going to go on my website. Yeah.
Have you thought about pricing at all?
No, not at all. Not at all. It was not my focus. I look at some things, but I didn't. The only thing that I really want to do is not charge a subscription for AI access. That's for sure.
You're going to have, I suppose, you're going to have versions come out as it improves over time. So you want to give people a path to upgrade, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You want that. You want that because it's not a. I don't think it's not a natural plugin like before. It's not a system that you buy and I'm going to wait until 2027 to give you a new version. Like I'm probably going to have new versions monthly, for sure. Like it's evolving so fast, and there's so many things that needs to be added that I put on the backlog. And when people are going to get in it, they're going to have different suggestions and see what most people want, so are probably going to direct where the flow is going to go. So
I'll put Charles on the spot here. Just like if you were to, once you start charging for it, real money, there could be a huge back end problem with doing tech support and all the kind of stuff that comes with that.
Mhm.
And the reason I asked Charles, because he's been down this road, and it so beta testers maybe to get it out to a certain amount of people, see how it goes, and see what the level of questions are that come back. How much documentation do they expect? Something that's beta or free, you can tell people to go try it and see how it works.
Yeah.
Once you start
though.
charging for it, it
You
it looks fantastic and it's worth a lot for sure. So
Yeah.
So I can answer a little bit of that if I could. There's a fundamental difference between a platform and a tool in terms of support. Things like plugins, generally in that tool category, you don't usually have as much because they're sort of ship and forget to some degree. Very much like, you buy something like I got a Stream Deck here, for example, and they could just ship it and forget, but there are updates and things like that. And there's a little bit of support along the way. But the support in a platform is a lot more intense because the platform is real time. There's a lot more things hanging on it. The tool is used to build something and then you're done with it. So the support on the hammer, it's okay, my hammer's not working, I'm going to use a screwdriver today until my hammer gets fixed. But if I'm supporting the road that or something else that's a substrate, that becomes a lot more. So I don't think it'll be so bad. I think Bruno's done a really excellent job. You can see the user interface is quite nice. He's got quite a good eye.
It's great.
So I think that's going to be a big one, right? And as our community starts to use more AI and we start to understand things better, and that goes for everybody, not just our community, but every community. The common things that people would have support questions for are pretty much you're going to learn that through sibling type knowledges, from shared or transfer knowledge. I think so.
So, Charles, is it safe to assume that Bruno's doing work with you? Can I be that nosy?
Yeah. He's part of our team as well. He's doing
Yep.
some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
So we're working symbiotically.
Good catch, man.
So
Very impressive work.
Incredible.
Thank you.
thanks, Bruno. Gotta go. That was great.
I'll keep you all in touch. I saw a bunch of few emails come in. So expect to get like real official news next week. I think this week was the final trial with last week as well, where I wanted to wait for a full 7 days of I'm using it correctly and religiously and it's stable, because I've been using it. Like it generated great stuff before it was even stable. So and now it's just I hammered most of the stuff, but I'll see how I expose it and how it gets released. But the waitlist has been, they're probably maybe the first person that are going to get access to it. I have no idea. And it's 10:30. Yeah, it's no time to make that kind of decision right now.
Yeah.
we're pushing Bruno too because our team needs it. So
Yeah.
I see.
so it's like, come on, Bruno, here, add this, add that.
Yeah, and every time I was going into the architecture of the software is different. So you're using variables, you're using like not layout, navigation, that kind of stuff. So it's a kind of a different need. And I did finish some integration today with it in the system, and it works super well. But like it needs to be able to fit to whatever you're trying to do, I think. So if it's only able to do one thing right and the rest falls short, it's not ready to go out. But now it adapts. And the best effort that's in it. And you see, well, I tested the project rules live because I didn't test those at all. So I'm glad they work. I'm not going to spend time debugging them. I know they were coded in a while ago with the project context that I removed because it was crashing, but but it's good to see. So like maybe that was the last part I didn't check, and there is the discovery button that didn't work today, but everything else rules. So I'm not too much more worried. And I have documentation has been done as I went through. Already have everything laid out because I kept it up for myself working in it to make sure that because it's kind of huge in terms of the code base now. So I have a user-facing documentation and I have an internal documentation. So I'm not too worried about that. And in terms of the interface, from what I've showed on the website, and as I said earlier, I'm removing all of those toggles that means nothing. There's a few things you're going to click on because you need them, but like I don't want to give you the permission to stop the system from asking you a question that it needs to ask to make a better product. So like things like that. That's the one thing that's still on the website that's no longer part of this. It's just activated by default. The web search changing models is pretty much all you need. The rest is pick your lane and ask away, and it does what it needs to do. Oh yeah.
Definitely.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Charles, what does KLAI stand for? What does that mean?
It stands for nothing.
Does it mean
You can make some
anything?
stuff up though.
Sorry?
You can make some stuff up, but it doesn't stand for anything.
Just random letters?
No, it's not an acronym. No.
Okay. Just kind of wondering. Nice.
Yeah.
Good upgrade to your website.
Pardon me?
It's a nice upgrade to your website. I was just wondering if it had a meaning.
Yeah. No. There's no meaning in that sense. No.
Alternate spelling of the
Alternate spelling
malleable.
of clay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Say again?
It's clay. It references clay, like as in Play-Doh clay, that kind of thing.
Oh, not as in Clay Mackel.
No, not that clay.
Have you-
But we can say that to him if he's going to give us, if we get something out of it.
Yeah.
have you rebranded Better Forms, or is this a separate
Yes.
project?
Yeah.
Oh,
No.
okay.
That is Better Forms is now Clay. Technically, Better Forms. The product is Clay Studio, and Clay is the company or the brand.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
as we transition into releasing more products.
It's a very clean website.
Thank you. It's mostly AI built in Better Forms.
Huh.
Built in Clay.
Bruno,
Hey,
I told you guys the AI on Betterform was great. I was not kidding. I said it earlier.
so Bruno, you did most of the UI design on Genie yourself.
Yeah, I did everything myself.
It looks really nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
I did a mix of I really like Gemini. I don't know. I have a thing for Gemini, the way that it behaves, and it's inspired by that, but it uses Tailwind as most of the style. And I try to make it as I'm good. I think I have a good UI UX design eye for that. I've always been like really keen on that. But yeah, everything myself. Like it started from a bad C++. I probably have an old version of plugin somewhere. It was really ugly, and then I needed it to be responsive, to have all those little quick, nice loading animation because, and I think it's all it's not a native FileMaker interface, because if I were using a native FileMaker interface, I would have not been able to.
Oh, of course, yeah.
That pretty, yeah.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, I mean, I look forward to seeing it evolve. I think it does need some things. You're going to need to find some way to get the relationship graph as my little pet.
Oh, I would
see.
dream. I could dream of nothing better than having more access to that, because I wouldn't be unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, but no, but
more.
I mean, talk about roaring out of the gate, man. This is phenomenal.
Well, I've been around for a while, but like I said, I'm not. I didn't participate much in the community. I know most of like some of the names I recognize because I started looking at those starter files, and that's how I learned. So
yeah,
it's funny now to talk to people and show what I've built, but like it's nice at the same time. And this really comes from a place of I needed this myself, really, and I think that's why it is the way it is. I don't want to just create something to generate FileMaker code and get money for token and then go. I really wanted it to expand FileMaker and be what like some of the software that I use, FM Perceptions, for years. It changed the way that I worked. I wanted to kind of, I needed that same effect. And now with the AI era, I think we're
Yeah.
there.
Well, it's interesting. You know, I mean, I made a comment earlier on in the comments that when we got FileMaker 7, I assumed that within 10 years, FileMaker was going to be an open platform where we could, you know, there'd be all kinds of third-party utilities and stuff. Never happened. And now somebody mentioned earlier, Clarice, talking about being able to build a database from XML. It's the first time we're hearing anything official from them in 22 years that's even along those lines. But AI has really, suddenly we have a whole crop of products. I mean, we've got Agnes Riley's thing. We've got
Yep.
we've got DB Services thing. Now we've got yours. Suddenly we're getting the ecosystem that we have deserved for 20 years. It's really
Yeah,
exciting.
and it's nice. It's really nice. It's nice to see those innovations because this is what it's motivating as well for FileMaker because we got a lot of AI stuff early on that I don't know for you guys if you saw any values in any of these things, but for me, I did not. Like there's some functions that they've added, they're pretty cool, but I don't know, like every platform is moving towards that kind of thing that I've done with Jenny, and they did not, and I didn't get it. So, but I think this is great. I'm seeing this as a good thing, in the sense that it's gonna change the way that FileMaker is going to be used for like how you're going to create your scripts and things like that. And the more it's going to get out there, and especially with like if they have thoughts on like, well, you're going to be able to do more with the XML code. What it means for everybody who's doing AI tools like this is, well, we're going to be able to build tools that are going to do more of the work for us and help us focus on what we do best, which is think and design. So it's fun to code, but for me, I like using AI to do it, and I still think the same way that I think. I just build differently. I just code less. That's the only difference. But I still do the exact same job I love. It's actually more in love with my job than I ever was because my brain can just spin, and if I can take the time to say the right words, I'm going to get the right results, which is pretty cool.
You don't get sidetracked. Like, you know, you could have a bug. Like years ago, I had a bug that lasted 3 months. We had a bug in our system once that lasted 2 years. 2 years for a bug, right? We worked around it, but it was a fundamental bug. I had to go to Evan Yu, Bruno. I got a picture of me and Evan Yu, creator of Vue.js, because that's what our platform's built on. And he's looking at it, and we're stopped during break. And he goes, "Oh wow, this is a really hard problem." Then we met again at lunch, and he goes, I think you might solve it this way, right? And there wasn't the way, but it took us 2 years, and then finally kind of got an idea. It's like, oh, what do we do this? So that's those kinds of stuff that doesn't happen anymore. Like that,
Yeah.
AI can usually plug through
Yeah.
most of the time, plug through a lot of those things and all the mundane stuff that we do. Like, oh, like we're too lazy to do. Like who refactors? Right? Other than me. Like, I don't think there are many people like refactoring stuff. I'm going to rewrite this script because it's just ugly. It's, you know, there's no gain. It's a lateral movement, right? But AI is like, boom, it's done, right? If you need to. Or the next time you touch it, you have the AI prompt and say, whenever you touch scripts, like I have a thing that whenever it touches a script, it puts a doc block in, revises all the comments, adds the white space and all the stuff that you need. And it's like every time I touch it now, it's just better as I move along. So, like Bruno said, it's such a game changer in that sense. And I don't think it's displacing our jobs because the reality is, like, you know, name one of your clients, I don't know, an inspection company, right? That seems to be what everybody has anyway for FileMaker clients, right? And some kind of inspection company. That person doesn't want to go out and they might vibe code a little widget thingy, right? That tracks your employee hours, but they're not going to build an entire system. They're not going to build an entire CRM for their business, plus all of the other stuff. They're still going to hire somebody to do that because it just makes sense. But that person they hire is going to be using the AI.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'll be honest with you, and I hate to even sound like I'm saying anything negative about it, but what I'm feeling in the back of my head. So I recently had a job where I happened to have special expertise, just from years of experience that made me especially attractive for the job. Now a less skilled person with a plugin can do it. That's a little scary to me, and it's just a fact. I'm not judging. This is technology. It's out there. It's going to happen. I'm glad that a good guy is doing it well.
that's
But it
always
is a
been the
little
way, though.
scary.
With any technology, it's been that way. Like like a less skilled person can do something with the advancement of the technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, a classic assembly line is making, you know, they're making
Yeah.
a dishwasher at the other end, but the person just
Yeah, but we
uses a
as
big machine.
but we as FileMaker folks have been kind of removed from that. We haven't had that in our particular narrow sector. I know a lot of you guys. I mean, I'm a web developer too, but it's funny. My web development, and my FileMaker have never overlapped. I know a lot of the agencies and stuff have a lot more overlap. So maybe you've seen a little more of that. But I said something at the very beginning in chat that I've kind of been over the last few years razzing my friends who are developers in other areas, saying, "Well, I'm a FileMaker guy. AI is never coming for my job." And then suddenly this demo, I'm like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's not gonna take the job out. You got to see it as like I did carpentry when really early on in my life, and when you learn from people who are I was 20, maybe less than that. And people are like 65, 70 years old, and you're coming to the site with your DeWalt saw and a battery, and they're like, "What the heck?" And you can just do things faster than them, and they give you a couple of tricks, and then you just beat them out because they don't have those tools, and they don't want to upgrade their tools because it's not worth it, and their tools still work. You got to see it that way, I think, because if you don't know like how to properly engineer the system that you're trying to design, which is what experience and what I think this field is all about. Yes, it can generate you all those SNS script that I did, and it can create them. But it's still a good idea to review them and understand what they're doing, because otherwise all you get is a big slop.
Yeah, and I agree. I think by and large with vibe coding in general, it's a tool that makes experienced and skilled developers faster, but it doesn't actually. It's not a magic wand. It's not going to let.
Oh yeah, the studies are actually
poof.
changed. The studies are out now, and this whole 10x thing, yes and no. Like 10x on very narrow scope things.
Yeah.
Like Greenfield, to start from scratch, you can build something with one prompt.
Yeah.
Right? You see the guys on YouTube do it every day. But take an existing database, add a feature, and make sure that feature doesn't create tech debt in the future, right? Technical complexity is now the new tech debt, right? Then that's a different story. That does take a lot of refinement. Like I've actually found, like I don't write any. I have not written any code, including FileMaker, this year, right? Which is like virtually, I would say nothing. I actually haven't done anything. But I've never worked harder. My God, man, I've worked so freaking hard now, like because I'm monitoring these agents and going back and forth, and it's a rank. It's like herding cats kind of thing. Sometimes it's. I want to say it's great, and it is. I kind of like the old days too, though. I really liked. Getting lost in a problem sometimes, not the mundane stuff, but getting lost in the problem and solving it and getting that eureka moment. You don't get that quite as much.
Yeah.
But you just produce more of those little smaller ones, smaller endorphin hits more often because almost every prompt is a little hit.
Yeah. So. And I think there's a certain skill and expertise to knowing when you're going down a rabbit hole versus when it's when it's being productive, and recognizing, because it's an incredibly slippery slope. You're onto something, it's looking good, and suddenly hours have gone by and you're like, wait a minute, where did this go wrong? My first 2 months working with LLMs were a lot like that, and eventually I learned to say, like, well, we got to cut this short right now and re-examine how we're approaching this, because this is
the minute you lose attention to what it's doing is when it usually goes sideways. And you can prompt a lot of that stuff out. Like we have pages. We've been working on a project for this quarter. I haven't even started coding it. I'm just doing the research for it. Like Bruno started to work on a little bit of the project, right? But the fundamental part, I've just been doing just to try to plan that architecture out, so we don't do that. We don't get stuck in any kind of weird little loop. It's challenging there for sure.
Yeah.
Charles, are you seeing clients migrating to Salesforce and Salesforce? No, you're not experiencing that.
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, FileMaker the general FileMaker community would probably see that closer. Like
I'm seeing a lot of it, and I'm wondering how AI affects all of that. But I've lost a number of clients recently, including way out in Minnesota.
So they've moved off. Now, who did the sale there? Because I've never heard of a successful migration. Like,
yeah, I know. I hate the.
Has there really been truly any successful migrations out of FileMaker?
I can't address that. I know I was working for a huge medical company with 20 developers, right, and all in FileMaker, and then they decided hired a new IT director, and he decided to move everything, 12 developers over 20 years of a FileMaker system, which uses your Evan Beta forms. And
Oh, really?
they decided to migrate over, it's going to take years, all of FileMaker out to, and we had like 10 servers. This is really a big deal. They're migrating everything to Salesforce, and I'm sure that AI is involved in that. And I'm trying to feel out the overlap between FileMaker and Salesforce and AI, right?
I'm trying to think of who are you allowed to say, or?
Minneapolis, I'll tell you that. I'm not going to say anything else on a recording.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
I can turn off the recording if you like.
Yeah, do it.
All right, we're ending the recording, and it's all the stuff you would have liked to have heard, but you'd have to attend in person.
Wait, FileMaker is the greatest platform ever.
Oh, it's
Now
wonderful.
Now we can get you more pricing.
Wait a second, I haven't stopped it yet. Let's see.
So, is it off?
Okay.
Or no, it's not off yet.
It's stopping now.
FileMaker's great.